It's been said that gardening is cheaper than therapy and you get tomatoes. Well, with trowels, rakes, and shovels at the ready, many of us are getting set to find peace among the flowers and create our own little paradise. And from plants to lawns, spring is an excellent time to take your garden questions to the plant medic. And happily, the doctor is in, and he is with us for this edition of PrimeTime. Good evening, I'm Bruce Haines, and it's a pleasure to welcome back Ricky Kemery, retired extension educator for horticulture at the Allen County Purdue Extension Service. And he's also known as the plant medic in his bi-weekly columns with the Journal Gazette. And he is here to help answer your gardening questions. Just call the number on your screen as we widen out and say good evening, Doctor.
You know, I've been making millions of dollars writing for the Journal Gazette, so it's an honor to be here.
Well, and it's an honor for you to be there as well, too. Folks being habit-formed to know where to go for the advice.
I'm just teasing. I work pretty cheap.
You do. Yeah. You're doing just fine. Well, and in fact, there was this discussion about the trout lily, I think, in one recent column.
Yes.
We can circle back to that. I'm imagining that one of the lead questions that everyone is wondering is, can I plant now? Can I plant now? Well, you know, can the signal go off so that I'm free to be set loose into my backyard?
So I was doing a little research on that because things have changed as far as the hardiness zone that we're in. Most of northern Indiana is in hardiness zone 6 now, and a little different from what it was a year or so ago, which means that in theory you can get out a little bit earlier. There's certain plants that you can use that maybe were a little iffy before. But the general theory is like May 9th. That's sort of the cutoff point where after that date, the chances of having a severe frost or freeze go way down. So I always tell people, how willing are you to gamble? And I would say, can you plant trees and shrubs and most perennials now? Yes, you should be out there planting those things. Can you plant cold season veggies like kale or lettuce or spinach? Yes, do that, because the chances of them getting injured are even less. Should I plant my tomatoes or my impatiens out in the garden or my tropicals? I'm staring at raws. That is more gambling a little bit. And honestly, there's no real downside to planting a little bit later. Some people say plant after Mother's Day. Some people say plant later than that. But plants that are planted later, in my experience, tend to catch up just as fast as ones that were planted earlier, because the ones planted earlier, especially this year, have been pretty sluggish. Our weather has been kind of weird for the latter part of March, where it's been cooler and rainy and things are just slow. You can see that out in the landscape. You just see sporadic flowering, where certain years, I miss those years when everything would flower almost all at once, and you get this riot of color in the landscape. I haven't seen that for several years now.
Sometimes there is that concern that comes up in conversations in March that, gee, it's been abnormally warm and look at the crocuses and they don't stand a chance because, you know, and with those kinds of memories still relatively fresh, I know we have a graphic to show a little bit about how we're celebrating spring, but what has this past winter done to impact this spring?
It has definitely been warmer overall, and if you want to show the first slide of the weather, and here is what's expected. When you look at those weather maps from NOAA, the Climate Prediction Center, what you see is for the rest of, you know, the spring or summer, it's above average temperatures, and we're right on the edge of above average moisture. Well, we've seen that. We're 5 or 6 inches above precipitation right now. And what that means is I would get a lot of mosquito repellent ready, And I would get some fungicides ready because we're going to see both this summer. It's going to be, in my opinion and others, a more hot, humid summer, which I don't like, but that appears to be what we're going to be seeing. And it's not my favorite thing to go through. We'll be longing for the cooler days that we've experienced, but that's what the predictions say.
Yeah. We'll be returning to the temperature portion of that comment because there are some suggestions I've seen regarding when you put the tomatoes in and what the recommended temp of the dirt needs to be and so forth. But here is another coming forward with a question. Greg is on line 1. Greg, good evening, sir. Go ahead with your question for Ricky Kemery.
Very good, sir. Ricky has given me a identification and analysis of a northern bay. As he identified it, it has been severely trimmed against my judgment. I'm asking, it is starting to bud now. I'm asking how I can bring it back. Well,
I'm a little... It goes back to common names again. When you say a bay, it's not the herb bay. It is like a bayberry shrub.
Okay, very good. I got your analysis. You identified it from the Allen County Conservatory.
Well, I can't remember anymore.
Right, no, I understand.
What did I say it was?
A northern bay.
I think it's a shrub. So it was pruned, and you're not happy about that, and you want to have, how do you get it to sort of recover from that? Mm-hmm. I would in this case fertilize it a little bit because of all the rain we've had. Not a lot, but just a general all-purpose fertilizer scattered in and around the plant, preferably before rain. It's not going to be hard this time of year to apply it before rain, and just get it actively growing again. I've actually been out in my garden and I've fertilized some things twice already just to get things moving because things were so slow. And I've reaped the benefits of that in how the plants are growing. So you want to get it actively growing. Don't prune it again for a long while. Let it get established again before you worry about that.
My question is, I'm seeing buds on the remaining limbs.
That's good.
And yes, indeed, it is. And then at the very top of these remaining stems, it's starting to, kind of, the leaves are popping out.
Good.
And then the rest of the stem, we see buds, but they're not fully coming out. But can I trim off these, the tops?
Are they dead or alive?
I'm sorry?
Are the tops dead or alive?
Okay, they are alive. But
then I wouldn't do a thing.
Oh, okay.
Leave it alone. Let it be, as the Beatles used to say.
It sounds like you'll have a good season with that, sir. Thank you very much for your call. And you wonder about that because when you talk about fertilizer, I know with lawns, we're looking for something with a little more potassium, I think, and there's compost in the garden. How do you prep the soil to get the kind of return we all wish we had?
Well, with a lawn, you can't. It's hard to prep the soil because it's already existing. You can top dress after you core aerate if you haven't done that in quite a while. And I would use a good compost, Canadian sphagnum peat, rake it in the holes. You'll be amazed at the difference. And this is the time of the year where you can fertilize. I always tell people to use slow release fertilizers this time of year, especially if you're near any kind of water or runoff into storm drains. Use a slow release. It's going to not be affected so much by drenching rain that could wash all of it away. You want that fertilizer to stick around for the plant to use for a while. So it's more sustainable using slow releases in the spring.
And there's also power in composting too, apparently.
Yes.
Same difference.
Yeah, you can, most people don't make enough compost to use, but we are seeing a trend nationwide where lawn care companies are beginning to transition towards using more compost in the lawn.
Okay. We encourage you to call in your question or comment to Ricky Kemery as you're planning to see your garden grow before you, get that backyard check on a daily basis. Diane is calling with an offline question. She says, Ricky, I have some giant elephant ears that are being eaten by insects. What spray should I use to help stop the insects from eating my plant?
Well, I mean, the insects are kind of slow this year also. So I'm wondering how much damage you really have. Some people can't stand any damage to a plant. And so that you have to ask yourself, there's so much damage that I'm concerned that the plant is going to remain healthy. And there's different kinds of insects that can get in there and attack those. I think I would start out with something like an insecticidal soap. When I was teaching at PFW, we had some issues with a few insects, and we used insecticidal soap to get things under control. And it works pretty effectively as a starter. I don't think I'd be going to any high-powered stuff right off the bat. It's helpful sometimes to look at the plant at different times of the day, turn the leaves over, see if you can find any actual insects that are on the plant that are eating it. Is something coming at night, like a slug or a snail that is eating it? That's the hard part, is to be able to identify really what's causing the problem. But I would start with insecticidal soap. You can use the formulated versions, or you can mix about a half a teaspoon of dishwashing soap in water and put it in a spray bottle and spray the plants, and you should be fine.
There you go, Diane. Thank you very much for checking in. We'll look forward to your call coming in next. You see the number there on the screen. Let's return to some of the things you brought with us, brought with you graphically under the heading of What's Hot for spring. Let's show slide. There we go. What is going on in the hot department?
So what's hot are a couple of different things, and you'll see the companies that sell plant use these sort of key buzzwords. One is native. One is it's a good pollinator. Those are two big ones that are used. And the final one is how easy care is the plant. It doesn't need messed with a lot. So can I see that?
Yeah, sure. And so as we move from that activity to the next graphic, you have a pause here, a however, and anytime there is a graphic that begins with the word however,
it's tough. So what I was showing were some native plants like wild bergamot, which is a bee balm that's great to use in your garden. Can mass plant that. And then, there are some native plants like coneflower and things. And a lot of that was brought out by Doug Tallamy from the University of Delaware. He did some research on native plants and basically says that, there are certain plants that need certain insects and or organisms in order to survive. And so we've seen a lot of native species, even birds, diminish rapidly because of the loss of native plants in the landscape. So that is a fact. I'm in favor of planting native plants. But, however, in an urban landscape, it gets a little tougher because things like poison ivy, That's a native plant. I don't know if we really want to be planting that in our landscapes. Or my famous silver maple, which is when we have the derecho, most of the trees that were falling over were silver maples or old oaks. So there are certain native plants that just don't belong in an urban landscape because it's different. It's not the forest. It's not anything else. So if you can, though, plant natives when you can. The other part of that is when you look at plants like flowering pear, which is all around everywhere. How are we going to deal with that? I mean, hope for some sort of introduced insect or disease to kill them all? Because the way things are going now, they are everywhere and it would cost too much to get rid of them. They're everywhere. So who's going to pay to have them all removed? I don't think anyone's willing.
Let's put in a good word now for pollinators. That's our next image to share, and you've got a couple of photos under this category.
Yeah, there's a sort of a movement towards permaculture that came out of a guy named Bill Mollison out of Canada in the Pacific Northwest, but it has to do with it's called Gaia's Garden and establishing these areas where you can plant plants that work together to enhance particular growth of and try to create a stable community. And so, the picture up there shows an apple tree with clover under it. Clover is an awesome ground cover for fruit trees because it brings in the bees and the pollinators that pollinate the flowers so you get fruit. It's a pretty good ground cover on its own, better than just raw dirt. And so it's a good idea to try to establish some of these communities. So any flower that you put in a landscape is good, but when you look at the one there, the orange one, that's butterfly milkweed. Planting that in your landscape not only looks great, but it's essential for monarch butterflies and swallowtails and all the butterflies. So you do 2 or 3 things with one plant rather than just have it look pretty. Yeah. So I like doing that too. The other thing that I would tell people is to mass plant. Don't plant just one butterfly milkweed. Plant 10 of them in an area that fairly close together so that it cuts down on the weeds.
When you were writing your book about sensible sustainability, you were also focusing in on organic and being able to allow nature to help itself, if you will. Our next graphic speaks to something under organic and sustainable. Tell us what we're seeing here.
Well, if you're going to use a fungicide, if your plant gets a disease, and I expect to see a lot of that this year with the conditions we're going to have. So you get early blight on your tomatoes. What are you going to use? Okay, you got choices. I would prefer to use choices that are more organic or environmentally friendly. And that product there is the new Serenade fungicide. It's called Monterey Complete Disease Control. It's out and about. You can find it even online. The wonderful thing about that is that you can spray the plant and eat it the next day. A lot of other conventional fungicides, if you spray it on the plant, you got to wait 15 days to eat the plant. I'm not willing to wait 15 days. And I'm a little leery about using something that has that long of a harvest restriction. So I'm all for using organic products whenever you can. Just like the insecticidal soap, that's an organic product. Other conventional products I try to steer away from in a lot of different cases. And then the other part of that is, I'm a big believer in making raised beds for vegetable gardens, even flower gardens actually. And I'm really into lasagna gardening. We were talking about Chicago-style pizza earlier. But if you have I think that raised beds need to be at least 3 feet in height so you can reach things. And you can layer materials in that raised bed, starting with some newspaper and a little bit of hardware cloth to keep the critters away. But then you can layer materials like straw, shredded paper, peat moss, rotted manure, find a farmer and ask for all the cow patties in the field. And layer those, and what that does is they all compost over time, and you can create some of the best soil ever. And if you're a really good scrounger, it can cost you next to nothing. It would take at least 30 to 50 bags of soil to fill that bed with soil from a garden center. My friend Gwendra just got finished hauling about 50 bags of soil in to create a bed in our landscape, and she would tell you that it was not much fun. So if you can create soil easier and get better soil as an outcome, then I would say try the lasagna gardening. You can create landscape beds that way. You can, as long as you've got a little bit of time.
Yeah. And time, as you say, is an ally. Even if you miss the early spring planting, we were talking about temperatures of 60, 65 degrees, I think, in the soil as far as tomatoes go. But speak to us about second crops, I'm told. The seeds that can go in June, and no one feels like they missed anything.
Well, I use zinnias a lot. I have a few beds that are bare, and that I put the zinnias in. They look fabulous, but they also help keep weeds out of the bed. And you can seed those earlier in pretty soon. Now it would be fine. And they're going to grow for a while, and then they sort of fizzle a little bit, and you can go in and reseed those in the middle of the year, a little bit later on, and get another crop. You can, if you're willing to have some time to improve soil, you can seed buckwheat or annual rye in a garden space, allow it to grow, reseed it if you need to, and then in the end of the year where it freezes out, creates this wonderful stubble you can till into the soil and enrich it.
And see, this is another aspect of it that is probably a good note to go out on, which is there's not a bad season to think about planning to plant and allow your garden to work for you.
Yeah, now's a great time to plant. Normally it would be a little bit earlier in April, but we had cold days in April, and so it was a little tougher to get out there. But we're coming into a point where I was listening to a weather person the other day, and he was going to go plant. He said, I don't see anything in the long-range forecast that suggests we're going to have cold weather. All I see is pretty warm, humid weather ahead in the game.
Wow.
So we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
One way that we can follow the advice of the plant medic along is to get connected to your newsletter. Tell us about that.
Well, I have been writing a newsletter for even when I was in Extension for decades. When I retired from Extension, everyone kept emailing me, asking me, are you still going to do a newsletter? And so I said, sure, email me your stuff. And I have about 1,680 subscribers. It's called Home Horticulture or Garden Tips, a newsletter.
And it's on the screen right there, which is a great way to stay in touch with Ricky
and
as that goes along.
It's free.
I'm sorry, did you say free?
It is free.
There
It's
you go.
always been free pretty much.
I love it. As something too, again, we mentioned his book, and let's share that. He's brought in his own personal copy. There it is. Other copies are available where books are sold.
You can, actually Amazon is the place that sells the most. You can find different versions of this, different prices. So that's the best place to go get it. Sometimes they allow me to have copies to take out and about. I'm going to go down to Adora and sign books, I think.
and called Sensible Sustainability, a lighthearted approach to develop sustainable landscapes and gardens.
It's always been I have kind of a weird sense of humor, and so you can see that in the book. It also stars my cat, Hoggles, with his unique perspective on life and having me as a caregiver.
and every gardener needs an executive producer, which is the pet among us, I'm sure.
True.
Ricky Kemery is a retired extension educator for horticulture at the Allen County Purdue Extension Service. He has the world's longest business card, and this is the world's shortest program. But thank you so much.
It's been fun.
And thank you for allowing us to be a part of your evening as well. For all of us with Primetime, I'm Bruce Haines. We'll see you next week. Good night.